Yes, so my name's Tom Plowman. I have a background in AI. I spent the last 10 years in startups in Cambridge, focusing on deep learning. I recently moved to London, of all places, looking at a nice little startup called Quantum, sort of scale up, and we look at anti-money laundering and fraud, also in the insurance space. So I think there are a lot of people in the room who are quite interested. Naturally, as sort of we see the maturation of AI, I find myself increasingly looking at this area, and unfortunately mostly disappointed. So if I have a slightly sceptical voice, my apologies.
Richard?
Hi, my name's Richard Inman. I'm CIO here at BMS, and my background is in IT, pretty much. I've worked for a number of different companies, most of them in insurance in one way or another, but also for technology companies. There was a while back in the late 90s when I eventually convinced Bill Gates that the internet was a thing. Well, not me, the team that I was part of. And I did indeed build Microsoft's first ever internet properties. So I know something about trying to change direction of things. And I've had a little bit of a stint in consulting companies, including Deloitte and Boston Consulting Group. So my level of knowledge on this subject is pretty much close to zero. Today's very interesting speakers have increased that massively, but still very much below the average level of knowledge in this room. So I'm going to sort of play the amateur skeptic on the panel and do my best to try and ask some counter questions or pose some counter points as well.
Let me maybe start with your view though on why now. So we've heard from the two speakers that this is evolving. There's a sort of the beginnings of use cases. But why do you think, Richard and then Tom, why do you think actually most of us should care now, aside from wanting to protect all our data so one can't decode it in 5 years' time?
Why should we care? Well, so when I heard about the three different sorts, if indeed there are three, of quantum technology, I'm guessing that most people in the room heard quantum, right? Which is kind of the exciting, interesting, futuristic part of it. What I heard was networking, widgets, and computers, which are things that I understand and know very well today. And those things continue to evolve and grow at a pace that we're all familiar with, in terms of power, in terms of transporting capability, in terms of whatever it may be. So it sounds like the computing part of it in particular sounds to me just like the next evolution of computing moving off the digital platform. So why now? Probably no particular reason why now. I think it's a watching brief for me.
Tom, watching brief or more urgent than that?
Maybe more urgent. I mean, history has a way of repeating itself. I remember my first gig back in Cambridge was a company called True Knowledge, which became Evie and then was eventually bought by Amazon and became Alexa. And the secret to that company was, back in the winter of AI, it started developing AI. And it had the foresight to think, well, actually, the way technology is going to come along means that some of these ideas, such as feed-forward neural networks, such as restricted pulse machines, are going to become more feasible on the hardware that's available. Not many people thought about the possibility that a GPU and GPU technology could be applied to a data science problem in the way they are now. So I'm kind of thinking by analogy here. In terms of actual applications now, well, it's a little bit harder to see how things get put together. But you'd be very unwise not to be wondering at what stage someone will have that moment of insight, like we had with GPUs and TPUs in the AI world. So I sort of feel like having just about survived that sort of transformation in the way we do data science, I feel like I don't want to be caught out the next time when this next revolution comes along. I'm sure it will at some point. And it may not be now, it may not be in 5 years' time, but it will.
Thank you. Christian, there was a question earlier that we said we'd hold off, which was around what are the characteristics of problems suited to quantum computing. So you mentioned complex distributed systems. I'm not sure everyone knows what those are, so it'd be good to know.
I mean, I think let's put it the other way. And it's in a way, I disagree with what was said before. I actually have another point. But anyway, let's go to that specific question. You could consider probably quantum technology as a natural extension of solving optimization problems that at the moment are not possible to be solved with deep learning algorithms, and in general are too big to be solved. So we have too many points and too many features to identify, and therefore and in that sense, that's where quantum technology comes in. Okay, so that's really the point. So and again, the typical problem of that kind are very complex fluidodynamics, for example. Okay, so that's one example. So a typical problem when you design an airplane or a turbine. That's a very, I mean, you are talking in that case potentially of billions of points. Those can't yet be managed using deep learning on let's say, really you can with certain approximation, but in general, quantum technology can bring that sort of approximation. Well, it can remove the approximation in a way and go deeper, comparable to the kind of mesh solution that we have at the moment using differential equations. So that's a kind of place where you can go. That's one example. I gave another example around, again, complex, let me say, chemical problems, where, again, the options you have of folding a protein of just a few atoms are, again, billions of billions. And again, it's something that at the moment is not solvable using even the most complex data science solution. And again, that's where quantum computing will become handy. The mindset when we have a problem where you can really have let's say a huge number of possible solutions, that's where quantum computer can come in. Why? Because quantum computers can take all the solution at the same time and compute the probability. So that's what they do. They kind of do a massive parallel computing, in a way, think to GPUs, extended to the 2 to the n, let's say. So it's very powerful as a method, in a way. But again, the reality, the reality is going to be at the beginning, especially with the, as I said, noisy intermediate scale, which is going to be the middle, where we will be talking a lot of hybrid solution, where you have a combination of digital, of course, solutions, and for the most complex and very niche bit, we will be able to use quantum computers, because again, we don't have the algorithm yet, so that's going to be the challenge there.
And granted, it's certainly worth really distinguishing between the objective of a quantum computer, where we have a reasonably well-established theory of how such a quantum computer would work and how those quantum circuits would work, and the noisy intermediate scale.
Yeah.
And where I say my cynicism comes in is the idea that the noisy intermediate scale will ever be practically useful at a business level, certainly not profitable. Certainly, some of the claims towards quantum computing supremacy and in terms of quantum volume qubits have been very impressive, right? And theoretically, it's great. However, humbly, I read these papers which I barely understand from my AI background and think, but hang on. Sure, this problem you're solving, there is a probabilistic variant that can be solved very nicely and very well with a little bit of machine learning or maybe deep learning. Yeah. And so for that reason, every time there's been one of these announcements and then you look into it and you see that there's actually a really easy probabilistic solution, I get a little bit disappointed, which is a shame, because I want to be a fan.
Yeah, but an example...
Good, so let me, sorry, I see that going on.
It's an interesting discussion.
It's at the heart of the question, but I did want to... someone had a question for Dr. Natarajan, and I pushed it back. Was that you, sir?
Yeah, it goes just the conversation that you were having right when we ended about QKD communications and how secure they are. And it seems like they're quite secure because if somebody tries to observe the key as it's transferring it, invalidates it, and then they can't use it to access the information. My question is are QKD communications particularly vulnerable to DDoS style attacks where somebody interrupts the line not necessarily because they want the information, but just to continually interrupt it and prevent information from being shared at all?
Okay, so how the QKD, I think you know how the QKD works is, it is a two-channel communication. It's not a one-channel communication. We need a quantum channel, but to send a photons and receive a photons. Other channel is to help you to generate a bits, because there was another communication parallel is going on, classical communication, which help us to generate. I'm going to send this kind of photons so that other end can run some software protocols to generate a key. So if someone performs the DDoS in the classical channel, there will be a challenge. But in the quantum channel, it's very hard to perform the DDoS attacks, classical attacks, because it's a dark fiber. Either you can disturb or disconnect the fiber, or those kind of physical attacks. But in a software attacks, it's impossible to conduct in the quantum channel. But yes, of course, it's possible. If someone intentionally want to disturb the quantum communication channel, they can perform some of the DDoS attack in the classical communication channel.
Thank you. Other questions? Ed?
When should insurance companies start investing in R&D in quantum?
Go on, Richard. Start with that one.
Probably not today, but look, it definitely has practical applications, at least the ones that I can imagine. Even just thinking about what's been said tonight. If I think about what we do in relation to modelling catastrophes, natural catastrophes, those kind of things, those systems are so complex. Being able to do that, in something even approaching real time would be immense, not just for the business or the industry, but for society. That has real positive societal benefits. So if I thought there were any chance of being able to get that kind of solution at the other end of it, you've got my interest immediately. Flip side to that, we've got to store this data somewhere. And if I think about everything I've heard tonight, I've heard about how we can process data quickly, I've heard about how we can transport or move data quickly between different points. But I haven't heard anything that helps me to understand how we can store that data securely and safely. Certainly we won't be able to do that on traditional hard drives, and maybe we need to look at solutions like DNA or something. It's really going to stretch the parts of the computing stack that we haven't talked about tonight. And I suppose the cost of that, the practicality of it against the benefits it's going to bring, that's going to be the trade-off we have to consider.
Is any competing technology equal to quantum?
Well, so to answer that question, in the context of insurance, I would say it depends what problem you try and solve. And I think if I was sitting in the audience, I'd probably ask the panel, what problem does quantum solve? But in terms of being able to do that kind of modelling, for example, not to that extent, no way. Not to that kind of speed and extent.
And not just insurance, just generally. Is there a competing theory to quantum?
No, in that sense, no. I mean, what you could say, as you were saying, which is perfectly, you could say you could keep going how you're going with the trend we're going, and you can, let's say, maybe possibly achieve some of those in 5-10 years' time. So I think the question is quantum fast enough to keep up with the digital evolution?
Exactly. It will boil down to total cost of ownership of the solution.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you can always brute force it, right? These are all computational functions that we're trying to optimize. So we can always brute force it. And actually, I mean, look at fraud in insurance, for example. I can tell you now that fraud is not a problem where each of the entities in a business, the policies, the coverage, the customers, are independently identically distributed variables. So they're not really suitable for a large number of machine learning techniques. Most classifiers don't perform well if you're trying to classify an individual as to whether they're likely to be fraudulent, or much less a claim, for example. It just doesn't stand out that way. So our solution in the end has been we've had to literally build a network of the independent relationships between all of these different claimants and all these different policies and situations. Now, in a quantum world, you could visualize this network as a bunch of qubits, right? And suddenly, one could maintain this complicated view within the theory, where at one moment, these states, all these different entities and players, are occupying all positions at the same time. So, wow, I mean, that would be a lot cheaper than our approach of brute forcing networks all the time.
Yeah.
But, I don't see that.
Yeah, it's
coming
not
our way
going to be anytime
unfortunately,
soon. So
yeah.
That's definitely the point.
So in the I just want to add one more point. So in the cryptographic space, when you say all the cryptographic problems are computationally secure, it's built in by the strong mathematics. But the mathematicians are working on post-quantum algorithms, which makes complex mathematical calculation. So wherein it is an alternative, still you can use a classical computer to harden your computational problem, so that even quantum computer power can crack those computational tasks. It's called post-quantum cryptography. So it's all, they're heavily investing in one of the other areas.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
What are the quantum properties that are being most exploited right now, and are there any that haven't really been, that you haven't figured out, or we haven't figured out how to exploit yet?
I mean, I think in a way the point is, it comes to the maturity of quantum communication. I would say entanglement, which is the base of quantum communication, is probably more advanced from the point of view of exploiting. Quantum computing is based on entanglement, but a lot also on superposition. And superposition it's what, again, we are not that good, mainly for noise. Okay, so there is too much noise, and so the entanglement, but also superposition tend to break. let's say, way more. So that I would say that's where we are. That's the challenge, maybe, at the moment.
Any additional?
And the electronics that we handle those kind of optics, the kind of relationship between the electronics drivers, which is handling those kind of photons, is still it's a bit challenging for optical engineer and an electronic engineer work together to build a system, and it comes to work software. So this kind of a marriage is still it's not understandable still, because of there are a lot of uncertainties in the photons receiving the receiver end. We don't know when the photon receives, which path it takes to arrive the receiver. So just as a time interval of time to receive, but still we need to figure out a way how to capture a photon in a sensible manner. There are some properties still it's in question.
Good. You had a question.
So I want to go back to what Richard said about storage. I think that's a really interesting topic because I can, basically I have a, background in computer science, so I understand the compute part, which is, you have lots of probabilities and you can apply it once rather than sequentially. And I understand the transmission because, that's communication, that's the key, key exchange. But what I don't understand is how do you preserve the states? How do you know that hasn't, how do you know that you are still representing what it is? How do you, let's not talk about the volume. How do you even store in quantum sense?
Who's going to volunteer that one? That's a big question, and we'll move down.
The suggestion I give you, anyway, especially if you're computer science, have a look to the specific, and I have a printed version there of the Google, article on Nature. Okay, so it shows a little bit how the system works, which is like hundreds of DAC, hundreds of ADC. Okay, so it's very complex, the system per se. So in a way, let's say, the issue, as I said, is it's somehow, with electronic and photonics we have now, it's somehow relatively, it's mainly laser technology, so it's a 50 years old technology, knowing how you are keeping the state, so what's the state of your system. As I said, the verification issue, as I said at the beginning, is not about what's the state, but more about when I did my calculation, is the calculation correct? How can I cross-check it? There is no, it's not true there are no method, but that's where most of the research is nowadays, is exactly because it's a completely different kind of technology, which we don't really, even the verification, that's the complexity, okay? So you can be pretty sure you have a set of 0, 1 superposition of those at the beginning. You're going to have a set of 0, 1 superposition of those at the end. But the end result, does it mean? Is it correct? I don't know. I cannot cross-check it. That's the challenge.
This is the equivalent of, sorry, to pick up on your point, and to put in my small Canadian training, you're talking about event logging, right? Like at a grand scale, are you not?
No.
You're talking about an audit trail of all the transactions and the computations
No,
that have
I
gone on.
think you are talking about audit trail and logging and making sure what you are doing is supposed to be is according to design, but what I'm talking about is the storage, pure storage.
But the storage per se, at the moment, is the, as you mentioned, is the old...
Because what you're saying is the volume of input is not infinitely large. It may be going through a ludicrous volume of calculations.
But then it goes back.
But then it goes back to one answer.
It's on an hard disk.
Can I tell you a true story that might actually be completely counterproductive to the point I'm trying to make?
That's going to be fascinating anyway, so please go.
In my years as a vendor of software, especially into financial services, the one time I've really seriously seen anybody, and I can't go into details unfortunately because we're still active with them, any serious application of quantum computing was persistence, especially encryption at rest. So there is a vendor who's partnering with a startup who's based here in London, just off the South Bank, and they use quantum properties, or say a diode, I don't know the details, to create a physically unclonable function. I'm sure you've seen these before, and they generate a private key in computer science terms, which is better than the random generation of other private keys. So we have a great big elastic instance, and I know it sounds really mundane, but in that elastic instance, the private key is generated using a quantum property. Crazy. I mean, irrelevant to us as a vendor because we just authenticate as usual. SSL continues to work. but really interesting that the encryption solution has an element of quantum, even if it's very, very basic.
I still don't understand what the media is and how is that quantum.
I mean, the
Yes.
media is not quantum. As I said, I mean, the storage is literally at the moment is an hard disk. But we're not talking at the moment of, let's say, the sheer amount of data we're trying to store. It's the number of possible solutions that's difficult to compute. Okay, that's very wide. But the data is manageable. Okay, but it's a small number of copies. We're talking 52 now. So think about that. It can be easily stored in an hard disk in your Mac or whatever you have.
So
Okay,
it will always be a hybrid model. And
I mean, the point is, as you mentioned, there is an interesting, which is probably is a topic for another meetup, but let's say there is an interesting direction about storage, okay, memory stores. So quantum effects can have an influence into the storage industry, but and in a way it already does, okay. So the SSD memories you use, they have heavily quantum effects inside, okay. So and we are really very close to the quantum barrier from one quantum gate to from one electron to the others in our RAM memory and our storage memory. So in a way, we're getting there. So the storage industry from a different path, but it's a completely different problem in a way and technology there. So for them, quantum is more a problem to solve than an opportunity. Maybe in the future it will become an opportunity, we don't know, but it's a different trajectory in a way.
Good. Couple more questions in blue, sir.
Just a question, looking more at the commercial side, are enough people being trained in the quantum field to meet the demands of the industry if it grows as expected in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a very good question. It popped up, was last week in Westminster about conversation about that, and it popped up the same question. I think definitely there are not enough quantum physicists in a way, yes, but as he mentioned, the issue is not just there. What we don't have are enough optical engineers, electronical engineers, so the complexity of such system is huge. Okay, so manage a quantum computer, think about as managing a super complex data center. Okay, that's the number of people you need. So it's not just, of course you need two people who are able to understand the basic. Yeah. So one possible solution, and what was discussed, was for example, start introducing quantum physics into also in engineering courses. Some universities are doing, some others are not. That can be a solution because then you can start having engineers who understand the problem when they go into the field, because at the moment when they go there, they have no idea what you're talking about, so they have to learn from scratch.
In Bristol, how embedded is it
so
in
we
general?
have a center for doctoral training specifically for quantum engineering technology.
And does that go down to the undergraduate level?
No, it's from the master's level. So we have a course for the students, quantum computing course, and then quantum communication course. For the master's students, physicists, or applied engineering, applied mathematics students.
But not yet as an option in an undergrad degree?
Not in undergrad.
No. Okay. Good. Lee.
So I just want to explore the prerequisite of having near absolute zero for these things to work, as I understood it. Is that for the compute or is it for the communication as well? So this 120 kilometre link, presumably that's not absolute zero. I don't know. Are we going to see quantum computers basically shot out into the space to work to get the scalability? You know, will we be able to cool down enough of these things to make them work at scale and therefore to give any general use?
Sure. So for the communication, now if you look at this 120 kilometer link, it's not the quantum computer to generate the photons. That generates, there is a photon source which generates the photon and send it to other ones. There was not massive computing. We can use still a classical computer to generate the keys. At this moment, we don't need a quantum computer to generate those keys.
That communication channel.
Yeah, that communication is absolutely, we can run it with the classical computing power, with the amount of classical computing power. When the quantum computer comes in place, we can generate more number of keys. We can increase the number of key rates. That's the only thing. But still, you can achieve those rate without high performance computing, high performance network.
Good. Last two quick fire questions. Yes?
So somebody mentioned something about noise that's generated in these computations. Like, is this something that goes away with scale, or is this like a...
Not, but no. So the short answer is no. It goes away with improving the technology you're using. So as I mentioned, one of the possible solutions is moving away from some superconducting and superconductors needs to be close to absolute zero into ion traps, which are laser-based. So you need to think your qubit as a atom or a small molecule kind of floating into vacuum. Okay, so in that case, you don't need supercold, you need vacuum, which is easier to do, and you have a laser kind of keeping it up. So that's a way to reduce the noise. It might be the solution, might not, but it's a purely technological problem. Of course, the point is, whatever is the technology, you need to scale it as well.
Good. Ed, and then, sorry, we'll do two more. Ed, and then you, and then we're done.
So the big players like IBM and Google, if one of them cracks it and manages to patent enough of it to make it such that others can't do it, I mean, how much of an advantage would that give them over the next 25 years or so? And could that kind of, could that be really bad for the industry?
The answer is, I mean, of course it's going to give them a huge advantage. On the other hand, as you have always seen, I think again, thinking to the past, digital industry, you've always seen IBM going forward, and then Compaq came in and destroyed, I mean, just talking about personal computer, Compaq came in and destroyed their model, and then Microsoft came in as well. So I think what it's going to have, we're going to have different layers, and we're going to be sort of different quantum hardwares and then will be sort of operating system, algorithm top of that, application. So what is going to happen is that there's going to be sort of multi-layer, multi-tiers situation. And it's something difficult to predict now. But yeah, it's very unlikely, it's not even their own, how can I say, interest to completely close the market. You want to have some sort of, let's say, opening. So.
Richard, as somebody who's used to buying technology, do you have worries on that front that someone's going to somehow dominate it?
Well, I was just thinking about it. I was just wondering whether it's possible to kind of own the intellectual property behind this, because it's a, I'm just not so sure that it is. But I would say there's always a first mover, and I would be quite pleased if they rang me tomorrow and said that it was available commercially. I'd definitely look into using it. Now, if they were the only organisation to use it, would I be a first mover? Would I be interested in taking it on? Don't know. Your question was slightly different, which is if they lock it down, don't know anyone else to advance in the market for a certain number of years. I think that would be counterproductive, not least of all from the skills perspective of that question was just now. You just wouldn't get a number of people training in it because there'd be a limited number of jobs at Google to do that kind of work. So I think it'd be counterproductive for them. I'd love to see it commercially available.
Good. So,
thank you. Final question. So we hear algorithm used quite a lot here, because obviously these computers work fundamentally differently to existing binary computers. So what do you think are going to be the future constraining bit here? Is it going to be our ability to innovate algorithms that work in a particular way, or is it going to be the hardware and advances in the hardware, or are they going to just go and step into? What's the limiting factor?
If I look historically, to be fair, algorithms have always been behind. So if you just look to the pattern now, okay, so we always had some quantum hardware, and we didn't really know what to do with that. So it's improving, but it's still, that's what happened so far. But on the other hand, when the power goes enough, it's probably just investment shifts more in the algorithm, and then they improve again, and then you go to the hardware. But usually, historically, they're a little bit more behind. So the situation is right now, we have powerful, theoretically, quantum computers, and we don't have the algorithm. The only thing we can do when it's related to QKD, the only algorithm that really works is the algorithm that breaks keys. So the only thing we can do with quantum computer is breaking, let's say, secure communication. That's the only application known at the moment.
Good. Okay, I'm actually going to have the prerogative of asking the final question. So a lot of us, myself included, part of our jobs involves explaining where technology is going to sort of senior executives and boards and things to help them understand their broader business decisions. Can you each think about what the sort of 1 or 2 sentences would be if you're in a board meeting talking about AI or blockchain or whatever it may be, and someone says, what about this quantum compute malarkey, what's that? So Richard, you may even have had that challenge already. What would be the 1 or 2 sentences?
Thanks for choosing me first. I think I would say it's going to cost us more to cool it than it is to run the rest of our IT put together.